From the United Kingdom Independence Party to Strana Swobodnych Občanů, greetings. Please forgive me for not speaking in Czech, but you would not understand it, and nor would I. Europe is democratic, or it is nothing. Today, it is nothing. Tomorrow, if our will becomes the way, Europe will again be free. For me, one of the happiest chapters in the history of the continent we love was Listopad. During those great events of November 1989, what a brave and glorious example your great nation set to all who would reform the wicked world. To the communist security forces who had stood for generations between your nation and its freedom, your young people offered not violence, but flowers. Political power, said one of Marxism's cruelest dictators, grows out of the barrel of a gun. That sordid dictum was proven wrong forever when flower power defeated brute force and freedom triumphed here. I wear a flower in my buttonhole today to honour those young heroes of your nation whose courage and idealism set it free. Or did they? Of course, I understand why the Czech Republic joined the European Union. You had the most powerful reasons to express your heartfelt desire no longer to look fearfully eastward towards the tyranny, poverty and slavery that you had endured for generations, but instead to gaze hopefully westward towards the democracy, prosperity and freedom you had hoped to find in Europe. Our nation shared your nation's optimism the last time we were consulted on the European question. In 1975, a third of a century ago, in the only referendum on Britain's membership of the EU that was ever held, 2/3 of us voted to belong. I was one of them. Not anymore. Neither I nor most of Her Majesty's subjects would dream any longer of voting to remain as members of the European Union as it is today. Directives issued every 3 hours, day and night, 365 days a year, from behind closed doors by unelected commissars. Those commissars even have, and all too often use, the power to issue Commission regulations that have the immediate force of supreme law throughout our continent, regardless of the opinion of any elected parliament. A lavishly toothless talking shop, laughably called a parliament. Its members do not even have the power to bring forward a bill. Only the commissars can propose the supreme law of Europe. Over-regulation, that is as stifling as it is absurd. Whatever is not interdit is obligatoire. Mickey Mouse money that was fabricated not as a currency, but as a dismal instrument of political centralization. And as many of us had predicted from the outset, the euro is now doomed to collapse, and good riddance. The formidable free market economist, who is the great president of your great nation, is one of the few true European visionaries of our age. I have a job for your president. He has already used his tact and skill peacefully to dismantle one monetary union. That was the practice round. Now it's time for him to undertake a greater task in the interest of us all, he must dismantle another currency union before it destroys itself and takes Europe with it. No political constitution deserves to survive if under that constitution there is one law for the lawgivers and another law for everyone else. The Treaty of Maastricht is one of the untidy heap of prolix, diffuse, obscurantist screeds that constitute, for good or ill, the supreme law of Europe. It was and is supposed to apply as much to those who govern us as to us who are governed. Yet the Brussels Politburo had never had the slightest intention of abiding by its own treaty. As the discredited constitution of the collapsed Soviet Union moved inexorably westward, all of its essential elements were incorporated into the Constitution of Europe. Not the least of these toxic ingredients was the immunity of the commissars from any obligation to comply with the laws that they inflict upon everyone else. Sensibly enough, the Maastricht Treaty laid down the minimum criteria with which nations wishing to adopt the new currency of Europe must comply, so as to demonstrate sufficient economic convergence with one another to allow the currency union to function at all. After the treaty was passed, it rapidly became clear that very few of Europe's nations came close to complying with those necessary convergence criteria. Yet the euro was rushed into being anyway. It was one of the key steps in the Sovietization of Europe. At the time, only one nation complied with the convergence criteria laid down in the Treaty of Maastricht. That country was Luxembourg. Like the commissars of the Kremlin, their custard-faced successors in the Berlaymont thought they could scorn the treaty that they had themselves made and repeal the laws of economics by pressing forward with their Teuton currency in flagrant and economically disastrous defiance of their own criteria. The bankruptcy of many Eurozone currencies and countries today was a direct and ineluctable consequence of the Commissar's vainglorious folly. It is no accident that one of the three most prosperous nations that not one of those three most prosperous nations is a member state of the European Union. How did it come to this? How did the continent that invented democracy and gave it its very name come so suddenly and so sullenly to turn its back on its great heritage of liberty? The central elements of the current European Union constitutional disposition were foreshadowed by Adolf Hitler in Chapter 4 of Part 2 of Mein Kampf. Expurgation from all the leading circles in government of the parliamentary principle. Hitler wrote this: "There are no decisions made by the majority vote, but only by responsible persons." That's the commissars. From the municipal administration up to the supreme government, there will be no body of representatives, he wrote, which makes its decisions through the majority vote. And that is exactly how it is in Europe today. Exercise of all real political power by what Hitler described as the best brains. He wrote, "The best constitution and the best form of government is that which makes it quite natural for the best brains to reach a dominant position of importance and influence." Retention of parliaments purely in a consultative capacity, and as an opportunity, he wrote, for leaders to rise gradually who will be entrusted subsequently with positions of special responsibility. No vote will be taken in the Parliament. It is to be an organisation for work and not a voting machine. The individual members will have consultative votes, but no right of decision will be attached to them. The right of decision, said Hitler, belongs exclusively to the supreme government, which must be entirely responsible for the matter under discussion. As a description of the current European Union Constitution, it could hardly be closer than that. Hitler ends his consideration of the future of European government with these chilling words. Regarding the possibility of putting these principles into practice, I should like to call attention to the fact that the principle of parliamentary democracy, whereby decisions are enacted through the majority vote, has not always ruled the world. On the contrary, we find it prevalent only during short periods of history, and those have always been periods of decline in nations and states. This is the continent which spawned and then defeated Marx. This is the continent which brought forth and then defeated Hitler. Why then are the free citizens of our continent compelled to exist under a constitutional disposition so irreformably anti-democratic that it embodies so much of the political systems of both communism and fascism? You may imagine that any comparison between today's European Union and the vicious tyrannies of the past is inappropriate. You may consider that calling the Brussels regime a fascist or communist police state is unduly extreme. If you think these things, let me tell you a story, and when you have heard it, please think again. 2 years ago, a British citizen who had set up a business in another EU member state went bankrupt, owing €30,000 when his business failed. He returned to the UK with his wife and 2 children to start again. However, the Hungarian police decided that his business failure had been fraudulent and issued a European arrest warrant for him. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Britain's equivalent of the KGB, the Serious Organised Crime Agency created by the last socialist government, kicked in his door, dragged him from his bed and took him to London, where without any chance to prepare his case, he was dragged in front of a Supreme Court judge. At no time did the Hungarian police specify any particulars of any offence which they alleged against their victim. The procedure for the European arrest warrant did not oblige them to do so. To this day, the accused has not been given any details of what he is thought to have done wrong. The judge said that under the rules he was not allowed to make any inquiries about whether the accused had committed any offence, or what the particulars of the offence were, or whether there was any prima facie evidence against him, or even whether the Hungarian prosecutor was ready to bring him to trial. The judge said that under the EU rules he had no option but to allow rendition of the accused to Hungary. There, for 4 months, the accused was incarcerated in a filthy jail. Throughout that time, he was fed on nothing but rancid pork fat 3 times a day. The accused contacted a Conservative member of the European Parliament to ask for help and received this reply: "If the Hungarian authorities consider you guilty of a crime, then you are guilty, and I will not lift a finger to help you." For very nearly 800 years, it had been the right of any British subject not to be punished or imprisoned except upon due process of law, including the right to know what he is accused of and to answer the charges publicly in court. Not anymore. The right of habeas corpus, a fundamental right that Britain exported to many nations, is now no longer the free citizen's right in Britain or anywhere else in the European Union. Next, the accused contacted my noble friend the Earl of Dartmouth, a member of the European Parliament for the United Kingdom Independence Party, William Dartmouth at once contacted the Hungarian authorities and demanded immediate access to the accused. The Hungarians moved the accused from prison to prison in the hope that William Dartmouth would simply give up. Well, he didn't give up. He insisted on meeting the accused. On discovering the accused had been fed on nothing but pork fat for 4 months, he insisted that the accused be released at once. The Hungarians hastily complied, turning the accused out onto the street at 1 hour's notice with no money and only the clothes he stood up in. It has now come to light that the Hungarians were not ready to put the accused on trial at the time when they applied to the United Kingdom for their wretched European arrest warrant. They are still not ready to try the accused. Their original application for the warrant, therefore, was in fundamental breach of the law of Europe. More importantly, their failure to feed him properly constitutes torture at United Kingdom law. Accordingly, I can now announce that it is at present the intention of the United Kingdom Independence Party to apply for European arrest warrants for all these people: the Hungarian Foreign Minister, the Hungarian Minister of Justice, and the Governor of the jail, so that they will be brought to trial in the United Kingdom for the serious imprisonable offence of torture, which carries a maximum sentence of imprisonment for life. Don't hold your breath, though. There's one law for us and another for them. Article 1, Section 1 of the United States Constitution says this: all legislative power herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Congress and House of Representatives, period. In short, no one except those whom the people have elected may make laws for the free citizens of the United States or inflict taxes upon them. That central principle, that there should be no legislation and no taxation without representation, is the cornerstone of that great Constitution, and it ought to be the cornerstone of liberty once again here in Europe. If the citizens of Europe are once again to be free, either the Constitution of Europe must be reformed to make it recognisably democratic, or the European Union must be abolished. We, the free citizens of Europe, will no longer endure the corrupt and stifling tyranny by Clark that is today's European Union. Its future lies in the past. Its willful and persistent refusal to allow us any meaningful democracy is not acceptable. It must go. I was born in a democracy. I do not live in one, but I firmly intend to die in one. Dziękuję.